What if some of the most technical fly fishing in the country isn't on a river, but on a Southern California beach? And what if fly fishing the surf has more in common with sight fishing carp than bombing long casts into the waves? Today's guest fishes the Southern California coast, and today you're going to hear how surf fly fishing actually works. We're going to find about how tides replace current seams, how structure hides in plain sight, and why Corbina, perch, and even leopard sharks reward anglers who slow down and learn to see the water differently. This is the Wet Fly Swing podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to the fish species we all love. Frank Vargas is here today to talk about Southern California fly fishing and a focus on his local waters. You're going to discover how incoming and negative tides create predictable feeding lanes in the surf, where Corbina actually feed and why most anglers walk right past them. We're also going to hear about surf perch and how they make the perfect year-round species to learn fishing the surf, and when leopard sharks show up, how to target them and what it takes to get one on the beach. Plus, Frank breaks down etiquette, safety, and how fly fishing still thrives even in heavily populated areas of the country. This is a good one. Here you go. Frank Vargas. You can find him at fishermanspot.com. How you doing, Frank?
Good. Thanks for having me. How you doing?
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'm excited to talk. We're going to jump around like we always do a little bit, but we're going to focus on Southern California a little bit, where you're at. You're kind of in the, I guess, Burbank, right, is the area. You're down. The Fisherman's Spot is the fly shop that you work at. You do a bunch of guiding out there. So we're going to focus on that. Like if somebody was coming into that area, let's say they're traveling down to go to Universal Studios or something like that and wanted to go fly fishing, we're going to chat on some opportunities and then see what else you got through the year. But maybe just start there, like this time of year. I mean, the cool thing about Southern California is the weather, right? I mean, do you guys, I'm guessing you can fish year round, or give me an update on that?
Yeah, usually we do get to fish year round. Our peak season, usually is going to be like April through, October, just based on the water temps and the surf. Likewise, this past season, coming into December, we've had people catching, good sized perch, last month into this month. Corbina have been being caught on the blind. It's just weather dependent, like this past week, we've had some heavy rains come through. So the people that were out in the surf were, fish were on the chomp right before the storm came in. So that's putting us into December. And so as far as my experience goes, the latest I've caught a Corbina was, maybe early November, late October type thing. But, having people catch them, in the last month or so has been really cool to see. And just based on our water current that's been coming through, it's been warm. The only thing that we've kind of been dealing with was maybe like outside air temps, but other than that, you're just wearing shorts and maybe put a bigger jacket on or something. But yeah, we've been fishing year round. Likewise, we fish for carp too during our off seasons. So it keeps us busy here. If you're a diehard fly fisherman and you want to get out and fish, we have urban fly fishing is what we call it over here.
Right. Well, and the surf fishing, I think, is definitely a little bit different. I guess you consider that urban fly fishing too. What's it look like when you're out there fishing the surf? Can you fish the surf throughout that whole area?
Pretty much. I mean, it's just a matter of how far do you want to drive. I mean, it's for myself, if I'm staying down in Santa Monica, it's a 5-minute drive from there. I'm staying anywhere else, maybe I got an hour drive. And when I say an hour drive, that could be an hour drive down to south side of Santa Monica down to Venice. And then likewise going all the way up to Carpinteria into the Ventura County zone. So not just that, the shop's based out of Burbank, we kind of look at where our customers, live locally. And then likewise with visitors that you'd mentioned, when they come in, they're staying within proximity of the shop. They're able to come in or call and ask questions where they can go. They brought gear not knowing what to do. And we just let them know, hey, wherever your hotel is, it could be only like 20 minutes from the beach and you can have a good day.
Yeah, that's it. So pretty much just the first step would be probably to call you guys, right? If they're heading down there at the, it's fishermanspot.com, check in with you. And so who are some of let's talk about that real quick on the shop. Who are some of the folks, if they're going to call here in the next, this probably is going to go live in early February. Let's just focus on that for a second. Are there going to be some opportunities in February for fishing? What's that look like?
For February, yeah. That's when, honestly, so a majority of our regular fly fishermen locally are going to be looking to take hosted trips with us. So that's kind of us getting out of the area. So, if someone's coming to visit, we'd offer them that, if the time frames line up. But if they're looking to kind of come in and, fish locally, they're going to be talking to like Dave or myself. There's another person there named Sarah. She's in the surf a lot. So she'll be able to kind of direct them where to go. Yeah, so it's just, likewise, because if we're not on the water, our connections with our customer base and other people that are, giving instructions as well on the water too, we tap into that resource and we're all kind of networking together, figure out what's fishing well, what's the water temp, what's the clarity of the water looking like, and what's the bite. So from there, it's just based on, almost like a week by week basis, what's happening, watching the tide and all that. So we try to offer them the surf, let them know there's local carp fishing. And then likewise, if they don't really specifically want to do any of that and they're like, hey, I have like 4 days here and I can take a little, drive up to Mammoth or Bishop, what do you have to offer there? And, the network of guides that we have up there, that's where we kind of suggest them calling and getting them in contact with them as well.
Right. And then that's for like trout fishing within a few hours up north.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's I think when someone's coming from outside of the state, them not realizing, oh, these people do, that we do fly fish to surf. That's a whole like eye opener to them. If they're doing their homework already and researching their trip, and they're just as enthusiastic about fly fishing, they're going to know, okay, these people are out here fly fishing. This is the shop to call. These are the people that know what's going on. These are the people that are tapped into the Southern California fly fishing scene.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, in Southern California, I mean, we're talking Los Angeles area, but how far up where does the break of Southern California become more, where does that go away as you go north?
I think it's kind of right at that tipping point, kind of where I venture to would be like Carpinteria,
Okay.
Ventura County. It's almost like the north of Point Conception to me kind of gets a little bit kind of like that central coast, and starts kind of going up that way. That's kind of pushing it. But I think like for our majority, our customer base and, people coming in, that's kind of like where we would say we can really focus, where we've focused our time up that far. Down to, if you go southwise, down to Bolsa Chica is kind of like somewhere where we're kind of tapped into. We have customers coming up from Long Beach, Fullerton area, and so those zones down there, not per se that we're not fishing them, but some of the stuff that we teach or that I teach, is if you can read one beach and we teach you on one beach, you should be able to read any beach. So they just kind of, might come up to our zone and we might meet them out on the beach and spend some time with them, educating them on what we're looking for. And then they can take that back down to their home beach or travel up to whatever beaches they want to.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's talk about that because I think that is an interesting topic, reading the beach. How do you take that if somebody is there, they come in, they're brand new to it? What is that, instruction or what are you telling them about reading it?
About reading it, I mean, I use apps or I read the newspaper, and for starters, I look for my tides. So if it's a incoming tide, that's what I'm looking for. Ideally, if I'm going to show someone the structure in the beach, this right off where the rollers, the breakers are forming, that negative tide allows us to see like the holes and the troughs. So once they're able to kind of see that with a negative low tide and the water starts washing in, so we're just, as we're talking about structure, they're able to see how the water acts differently once it starts covering up those holes and those troughs. The way it looks, when a crab bed is exposed when the water starts receding out, to come in again to wash back up on the shore. So once we're able to identify, the tide and then some structure, now they're able to kind of start putting together, like as they look up and down the beach, they're able to say, oh, I just don't stand in this one spot. I can hit multiple spots. I'm not going to say that it's not trout water or, how we can read, behind a boulder or a cut bank, we're just reading different structures now, it's a vast ocean. It's a vast coastline that we're walking up and down, and, you fish it the same way. You just cover ground. And once like, we'll just keep it simple. Once you know where there's a hole and then there's, some food, a food source, you're able to kind of work that little area. It could be, 10 feet long, it could be 20 feet, it could be 30 feet. So, but once you're able to kind of identify that, you're going to, tentatively, there should be some fish there.
Gotcha. So yeah, the tides are the first thing. And you want, when you're out there, you want to be looking for an incoming tide. Is that the best?
For me, that's the best when I'm, showing people what and how we fish and what we're looking for. There's, always a discussion as far as, after, people enjoy fishing the hour before the peak of a high tide and the hour after, the bite kind of comes on. To me, we're fishing at like dark 30. So that means, as of right now, we'd be out there at, probably like 6:45, 6:30 right before sunrise. It does seem like, right as that, we might get a few bites, some fish to hand. And it's almost like as soon as that sun kisses the water, the bite kind of turns on. And then it's just kind of like they go into a feeding frenzy. And with that incoming tide, it's bringing those fish back into the food source.
Oh, it is. Okay.
So that's kind of where I like it. And then there becomes the stability in the water when it's kind of settling out after it's kind of been rising, and it's kind of getting to its peak. It just depends on the duration of the peak, what it does as far as it kind of like settling out, like I refer to it as holding water, and it's just kind of holding like a slow moving water that's keeping the food source covered and allowing these fish to travel up and down through the holes and through the troughs. And that allows us for some sight fishing, or at least, the blind fishing. We're able to read the water, the foam and how it's acting in the water there.
Yeah, I see. Okay. So that's your tides. And then, like you're saying, negative tide, going out there when it's super low, you can see where those structures are going to be and kind of plan your day to say, hey, when this gets up to that high tide or it's coming in, you'll know where those little, either rocks or buckets or, right, some sort of structure is what you're looking for.
Yeah, yeah. And even with the negative tide, sometimes we get like, this last couple of months we've had, this king tide, and it, had a super effect on the negative. And so we were kind of able to fish like a whole lot further out than we normally do, So when we're really, trying to double haul and send some line out there, shoot some line, it's we're barely hitting those marks, but it's almost like once we get these negative tides, we're able to fish like a whole nother zone, kind of where the surfers are hanging and beyond. So that's always the plus too, fishing like stuff we normally don't get to fish on super negative tides.
Okay. So that's an opportunity. So you got the two. So the incoming tide in that range and then also negative tides. And what you're doing is trying to get what are they doing? The food's coming in, or why is the incoming tide the best or that negative tide?
It starts covering up, their food source. It's a lot, it's creating almost camouflage for them. The more depth there is, the less exposed they feel to predators. I mean, number one source would be kind of like birds, seagulls, pelicans, they're swooping down on them. Clear sunny days, they're more exposed on when there's clear water. They're out in the deeper water where there tends to be more seals kind of cruising at that depth. So, if you have Corbina, Perch, et cetera, croakers, they're kind of more exposed to predators in deeper water. It doesn't mean those seals aren't coming in and they haven't, pushed fish to us. I mean, I've been able to cast at a seal, so that's maybe a 30-foot chuck, and they're right there. Just last time that I've heard, a seal was pushing some fish up to someone just like 2 weeks ago. A seal was basically coming on shore, chasing fish. Lo and behold, a person backpedaling. She still had the fish on, and she felt a good tug, and it was, wasn't the fish running away, it was the seal had gotten her fish.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that they're not afraid of us. Obviously we respect them, and they're wild animals, but it's just they're fishing and hunting to survive. So we just kind of watch them, and we watch those zones, and it's so basically, to answer long story short, is the food source that the perch, Corbina, croakers, and they're looking for are those crabs or clams. So when that water's, coming up onto the sand, if there's crab beds in the area, that's where you're going to find a lot more fish kind of coming in to eat.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. And those are the species wise, those are kind of the main ones, or what are the top species you'd be fishing the surf for?
Top, there's always going to be perch in the mix. You find a nice little hole, you'll find a good majority of perch. You fish behind the back of the crashing wave, you should be finding perch if there's a food source. Corbina, that's what we all kind of come out to hunt during the summer, and that's the plus. There's a lot of them when the water warms up and the food source is available, and that's what I'm going to say a lot of us are chasing. It's that sight fishing thrill that we look for. And I think, a lot of us, when we say we're on the board, it's we sight fished and caught, the first bean for us in the season. We kind of keep track of that. So I definitely say the beans are the ones we really focus on. Once you kind of start understanding the way the Corbina are eaten, the way you can catch them on the fly, all of a sudden, my experience is, all of a sudden the leopard sharks show up. So now all of a sudden now we got a bigger species that showed up. Obviously a lot easier to see because you're seeing dorsal fins or tails, and you're watching them either come in and out, or they're paralleling the break line. So we're able to sight fish at those. And that's kind of where I really see that's what I like to target. The Corbina is for sight fishing and leopard sharks for fly fishing. If there's nothing showing, we're fishing for the perch. As far as sight fishing for halibut, a little more challenging, but I've caught them on the blind, just kind of thinking where they're at, throwing something that, might trigger them to eat. And then there's croaker, yellowfin croaker that we, tend to get when we send our cast out a little bit further, just on the backside of some breaks.
Yeah. Oh, okay. On the backside. That's cool. So you have the breaks. What does that look like? Let's just say in Corbina, when are the prime times for fishing for Corbina?
I'm gonna say kind of just based on water temp, like May, we're gonna be looking at like May, it starts warming up May, June, July, August. Those are gonna be like our peak times. And as long as water temps, hanging in there, we're looking at September, October. And that's when you're thinking, not that you think, I mean, the more time you do it, you're like, okay, who am I going to see today? So the fly fishing community down here, and especially the salt, I'm going to say it's a tight little community. Everyone kind of knows everyone or knows who someone is. There's you're usually walking by someone, and it's the same way. You have etiquette, you give everyone the space and bump past them, and take I should give someone 100 yards or so, because it's, if it's the only zone you're working in Santa Monica, it's, you want to give everyone the opportunity, and if there's a lot of people on the beach, I'll go to another beach.
San Juan Rod Works started with a simple belief: great fly rods and gear shouldn't cost a fortune. As a family-run company, they focus on building high-quality fly fishing products that perform on the water without the premium price tag. You can try San Juan Rod Works for 30 days risk-free right now, and if you're not satisfied, send it back for a full refund. You can go to sanjuanrodworks.com. That's SANJUAN rodworks.com. Fishhound Expeditions offers world-class fly fishing right off Alaska's incredible road system. From monster rainbow trout to feisty Arctic grayling, you'll chase big species in the stunning landscape. Whether you're a seasoned angler or just starting out, their expert guides ensure an unforgettable adventure. Book your trip today before spots fill up and experience Alaska's diversity like never before. Check them out right now. That's fishhoundexpeditions.com. Is it pretty busy? I mean, obviously, Los Angeles is known for, lots of traffic and, lots of people. Is it, what's the fly fishing like? Are you seeing a lot of people fly fishing? Is there a mix of fly, conventional, and then you also have the surfers and everybody else? What does it look like on a busy day?
On a busy day, I mean, it's location, location, location. Where's everyone rendezvousing from the fly fishing community? You have different groups. You have women's groups.
Oh,
you have
right. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of the groups where you have a group going out and you guys might meet up and, like you said, do a class or something like that. So there are opportunities. You can go out solo and just find a beach and read it and go, right? There's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. You could show up and, a friend group shows up with 3 or 4, and, in passing, you're probably going to know someone. Myself and in the shop wise, I mean, I get to, meet our customers. I get to fish with our customers, and I get to see our customers out on the water. So that's what I'm saying. So you could show up thinking you found a spot, right? But then, all of us use maps. And so same people might be showing up at that beach. You might find some gear people. And, likewise, we're all fishermen. We're all fishers, if we put it out that way. And so we're communicating, what are they catching? What are they throwing? What size, leader, tippet are they using? When I'm speaking to gear guys, and then likewise, they're like, what are you using? That they're always intrigued with what are we catching, and you can fly fish out here, so we answer those questions a lot. But anywhere from like runners to, people just walking, people, with their heads down looking for shells. I mean, you're dropping a cast sometimes, it's someone's not paying attention and they're 10 feet right behind you, or you have, the tourist that's taking a picture right behind you, and, your head's on the swivel, not just for, watching the birds or, watching the sea life, it's watching for tourists. It's watching for the runners. Surfers, I mean, it's sometimes
Are they right there too?
they are, some places I've been where it's territorial, they're surfing, you get out of here,
Oh,
and
right.
it's express, and it's like, but that's just kind of, I think, how it goes. I think we all kind of try to give each other space, we're space to enjoy what we're doing out there. But I think it's the ones that aren't adapted to, the saltwater life, the water life of like, hey, I'm fishing for a couple hours, I'm going to give you your space. I'm going to, get my space. And we all kind of like end up working together.
Yeah, right. Right. That's always better.
Yeah, I mean, you come across tourists that are like, hey, I'm walking here.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
right.
hey, I'm fishing here.
That's funny. Yeah, the public, right? Public land is pretty amazing. Well, and that's what's cool about, really, I mean, a lot of public land, right? What does that look like in the coast down there? Are there areas that are beaches that are totally private, or how is that all broken up?
There is a lot of public land, a lot of access, then it comes down to like these little pocket beaches that, obviously we had a lot of fires come through. So a lot of beaches that were kind of overlooked because of the houses that were built directly on the coastline had limited access, and it was, you kind of had to just get on the map, or you had to park somewhere where you saw something fishy, and just kind of like walk up and down or drive slowly, and then you'll see public access. to these places that look like they're private. There is, private clubs that are on the beachfront, on the beachfront, right adjacent to where public access is. And we can't really walk up, like it's almost like the high side of the bank, the watermark. We can't walk through their property, but if we're fishing, in the wet sand, they can't really tell us anything. It's just how you access it.
Okay, so that's it. So the beaches. So as long as you're on the beach up to the high water mark, that's all public, pretty much the whole thing.
That's been my experience, but likewise, I mean, is it right or wrong? Is there, does it extend out to a certain point where we're not allowed to be on there? I know we can't use their parking. That's just based on experience, driving in, asking if we're allowed to park. They're like, nope. Are
Right.
you a member?
Yeah,
Nope.
but if you came in just thinking if you were fishing and you were working your way up north or something like that, knowing that you could fish it and then walk back to wherever you put in, you know what I mean? That's a good. But I guess the advice would be to call you guys probably and say, hey, we're thinking about going here. Maybe even ask you like where would be a good place to go if your first time. Is that some advice you guys give out there?
Oh yeah. I mean, we fish our, it's somewhere we know, it's somewhere we can send people to, whether they're, our local customers and they're just getting started. And it could be like we mentioned earlier, someone coming in for a vacation. We have like spots that are, could produce fish. And when I say could produce fish, it's just based on the person. It depends on the tide. If they find the food source, we give them a very descriptive picture of what they're going to go fish, very descriptive drop point, and how to work the water. So we do have multiple points if where they're staying, that we could refer them to.
Okay. And going back to that wintertime, so the kind of the January, February, March before it start, I guess winter, I'm not sure what it's like. I mean, what is the weather like there in that period of time? And can you go out there and fish pretty much, 12 months out of the year and have a chance at something?
Yeah, you can. I just was speaking with someone about that, and she's planning on fishing year round, and it's in the surf, and it's if that's our home water. I mean, I have to look at it like I have to own it. Like that's our home water. It's the salt, and that's where I fish. If I can't go to Mammoth, if I can't go to Montana to fish for trout, I'm going to dial in my home water, and that's right in our backyard. That's the coastline, and we're talking about that, and yeah, you are going to catch fish. It might be a little bit colder. You might have to work a little bit harder, and put a little bit more time in. But it's staying consistent. It's being fluent in your water, where you're fishing. So I think not just myself, but them too, and others. There's others that are out there fishing, year round. And it's just because we enjoy it, I like to say we go out there to relax and unwind, but it's also to go out and catch and learn. I'm always learning like what can I do better, especially if the water temps, the air temps, what's going on in the winter months.
Changing. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just adapting and just, being proficient at your fishery.
Yeah. Well, if you were out there, let's just say Corbina, it sounds like, May, more summer, things warm up a little bit. What is the typical setup you're using, rod, line for fit? And is it the same for whether you're fishing Corbina or fishing those other species?
So myself, when someone comes in the shop and they're, we always, fly fishing community wise, I think throughout always starts everyone with the 5 weight, right? Your first fly rod is going to be a 5 weight. So then when they're like, hey, I want to learn to fly fish the surf and I want to invest in a rod if I need to, that's where I get to educate them. I recommend a 6 weight with a sinking line with a reel that has quality drag. And a sinking line. So with that, I'll let them know that 6 weight, if you're a trout fisherman, that 6 weight becomes your streamer rod. If you're fishing, you're gonna start fishing for carp, there goes your carp rod. You're fishing, you want to start fishing for bass, that's your light bass rod. So it's not just selling them the one and done, and this is your only surf rod, and that's all it's going to be useful for. And I think the 6 weight's kind of ideal.
It is. So 9 foot 6 weight is the perfect surf for like Corbina or Perch or any of these species.
Oh yeah. We'll like go online and read and sometimes, online is right on and sometimes they're way off. So I think the best thing when people have come in and I get to, or Dave or anyone that, shares the same knowledge that we have, we're able to educate them as far as that 6 weight goes to use. And to me, you catch a palm-sized perch, you're still going to have fun. You're going to catch, I don't know, maybe a 3-4 pound Corbina. You're going to be able to put the bend on your rod, put that pressure on it, and then you have the fighting butt, so that becomes a useful part of your rod there.
Yeah. So 6 weight. So you would have, and then you mentioned singing line. So what is the good line out there? I mean, do you have an all around, and then should you have a few different lines in your quiver?
Yeah, when it comes, I mean, what I kind of come to keep it simple. I just use, basically anywhere from real or scientific anglers. Basically what I'm looking for is a 26, 27 foot head, sinking at 5 to 6 inches per second. And then the handling running line is an intermediate, so my head's going to sink super fast. And then that intermediate line is just going to get below the chop. Any movement on the surface, that intermediate line is just going to drop down right behind that. So that just helps me stay more in control and more in contact with my line. There's books, people have written, LQ wrote, the Corbina diaries, and he refers to multiple lines for different situations. For me, it's, I just use what I use, like I let other people know there's other sources, there's other, educated people that are also putting out information, and it's, no one's saying anything's wrong. They all have.
No. So you could use a dry line out there though, or do you have to have some sort of sinking line?
I would say I would avoid a floating line. That's one thing I would say. But if you wanted to use an intermediate line, because where you're at it's has more flats, and there's not a lot of water movement, and you want a
Right.
clear, stealthy line, and it just gets below the surface, that's where I would say, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah. So just use you could use an intermediate, like a full sinking intermediate, like it maybe like almost like you'd use on a trout on a lake, still water, full intermediate line.
Right. But that's based on conditions from
Yeah. If it's not getting down, where do you want to get down to these fish? Like how deep? And maybe describe that a little bit. So you get out there on the surf, you cast out. Are you trying to get this thing down to the bottom? Talk about that a little bit.
So if we're fishing for Corbina and we're sight fishing for them, we're looking for them. I mean, they could be right at your feet. So I mean, some of these pictures and you see people that they're completely dry, they're not bellied up out there chucking their line out 40, 50 feet. I mean, we're, 15 back from the wet sand. So we're standing in dry sand, fishing, an inch of water, if that, when it's, kind of skinnier water, it could be, like 2 feet that they're cruising and 3 feet. And there's just, a side breaking small little wave that they're cruising through using to travel. So, it's just a matter of getting the fly in front of them. Deeper water, tends to be a little more challenging when you're sight fishing them. That means you're all of a sudden now in their feeding area. So it's just being observant, when we're fishing for beans. I'll just keep it simple. Majority of the time we're fishing anywhere from, 1 to 2 inches where they're kind of sucking all the way up to the sand where the sand crabs
Wow.
are to, 2 to 3 feet in depth.
2 to 3 feet. And as you're walking, are you walking the beach, or are you and saying and looking for them, or do you go to spots you've known? Like, let's say you're new to it. Should somebody start just walking the beach and looking for spotting these fish?
I think that's key. Yeah, I mean, if you can't see them right off the back, and I mean, there's the easy part when they come in and they're almost like tailing carp. You'll see them, with tailed up, and it's like, cool, I can see that. But if you were not able to see that happening and you need to start looking into the water, you need to, number one, have some polarized glasses. Number two is sometimes you might think, was that a shadow? Was that a gray spot? Was that a dark spot? That's how you got to start training your eye. So it's, kind of going out on your own, having the understanding. That's cool to do. And likewise, if we're able to help you along with that, then that's what it is. But it's, you train your eye to see how they're swimming, what they're doing, how deep they are. My first experience was like, I went to the beach for like, almost like, say like a couple, 3 weeks and just observed, just watched. And then it was just training that eye to, even the most sudden movements was like, oh, there went one, and then it's, using your peripherals, expanding your vision once you're able to identify what they look like, what they're doing. The secret weapon is those polarized glasses. That's our superpower. Being able to see through the water, the clarity of it, and see what those fish are doing and see what your fly does once you're able to identify them.
Yep, that's it. So once you ID, let's see, you find a Corbina, it's out there maybe in a few inches of water, tailing. What's your first cast? What does that look like? And what fly would you be throwing on there?
First cast, if they're tailing, like if they're faced towards me, I'm gonna put it, kind of off to the side of their eyes. Their eyes are on the side there, kind of pointing forward too. So I'm gonna, kind of put it in a manner that's, maybe 2 feet from them, off to their angle, and I'm gonna try to strip it across their dinner plate. It's sometimes, the fast strip gets them a lot of the time when it's going by them pretty quick. Sometimes that's going to spook them. So sometimes it's just a matter of getting the fly to their dinner plate is what I like to say.
So as you know, this makes sense. So you've got the dinner plate. So you've got this fish that's sitting there eating, crabs or whatever he's tailing. Let's just say he's tailing. You make that cast a couple feet out off to his side, and then you strip that through it. You get the right speed. And would the strip be like a long? It varies, it sounds like, but would it be like a long 12-inch strip or like a boom, 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 boom? What would be the strip?
Yeah, I would go with the boom, 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 6 to 8 inches. getting it to move along on a rapid pace. Sometimes you might be stripping as fast as you can to trigger them. And so a lot of the times, I mean, I'll go with, a crab pattern works. There's a red checkerboard. I mean, I tie up my own flashy kind of like woolly booger that's like bright red and, some crystal flash in it and some a marabou fluorescent red tail. And it's just, I think we're for myself just really trying to trigger them. But then, once again, that crab pattern also works. If they're just so focused on crabs, sometimes that red piece that's, a material, it's not triggering them and they're just focused on those crabs. I'll throw a crab in the mix, or like a type of worm that is in the mix as well too. So I mean, it kind of varies. There's when they're kind of honed in, I'll just say if they're honed in on the crabs, I'm throwing a crab pattern, something gray. Yeah, razzlers or other ones that we use, kind of shrimpy slash clammy looking. That's usually kind of good. Like, I mean, I have like maybe a total of anywhere, maybe 5 to 8 go-to flies, that I can put in my pocket and go with it.
And those are flies. It sounds like you've got a lot of your own creations, but what would those 5 be? Would those be more a mix of crabs and?
Yeah, like the surf worm, the crab pattern, the red checkerboard, that's just to me is the trigger. The merkin's kind of one that you got in the mix, I have that. If I'm looking at a variety of another crab pattern, might be, just a merkin in gray. That's kind of it. And then the just the variation of colors, could be orange, could be brownish.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have a palette. It's almost like your streamer box. You're gonna have multiple colors of it.
Okay. So, and you get these flies. So basically on this situation, you would want to get the fly kind of down on the bottom and strip it across there. So it looks like one of those, whatever it's eating. And are there other fish that you're kind of sight fishing, or Corbina the main fish throughout the year?
A Corbina and then back to leopards,
Leopards.
timing. Right. Yeah. So that sight fishing part, that's what we really, for myself, I like to focus on, I mean, it doesn't mean I'm not catching surf perch in the blind or that I haven't caught a Corbina on the blind, but that's what we really look for is something to sight fish at.
Yeah, that's what you're looking for. So sight fishing, and again, that's what's cool is you're seeing the fish. And with Corbina, this is interesting. Like if they're in the shallows, you could be way back, not even in the wet sand, but over on the dry sand, casting across. And what is the distance you would want to be proficient at casting to really have a shot at Corbina?
I'd say at least 20 feet.
At least 20. Okay. So, and then sometimes you cast further if you need to.
Right. I mean, when we're on the dry sand, you might be down on your knees. So you got to be able to put, a 20-foot cast out from your knees, hunched down. We're not in a typical, prone position. We're standing straight up. We're trying to keep that low profile. So it's, at least a 20-foot. If you're having like really spooky fish, you're lengthening your leader. You're making a lower profile. You're really taking that time because even as you're going up to walk up, as your first time on the water, in the morning, you're walking to kind of adjust your eyes, and it's like you already walked up on some Corbina and they're spooked, and you might be that 15 feet away, so it's like, okay, I need to adjust. I need to maybe wait for a little bit more light to show up before I kind of start, getting too close to the water.
Gotcha. Okay. I wanted to highlight too, since we won't get into all this on Corbina, we did have an episode with, you mentioned Al Q, episode 219 a few years back. We'll put a link to the show notes. And we also did one with, we talked to Tyler down in Mission Bay. He's down, I guess, closer to San Diego, but probably some of this stuff overlaps. Would you say if you're fishing surf in San Diego versus where you're at with some similar types of fishing?
Yeah, it's like the beginning of what we were saying. You read a beach, you can read any beach. You understand, the structure of the beach and the tide and the food source. You got a good shot of finding fish of whatever beach you walk on. And that's a big thing that I get to teach. Or I get to let customers know. I mean, I'll show them pictures. I'll show them what we're looking for and how. And once they're able to identify that, they could be down in San Diego and they could be all the way up to San Luis Obispo. Just kind of thinking, and they'll be able to read that beach and be successful, hopefully. Just to put out there too, I mean, we do fish, we go to Long Beach Breakwall for calico bass.
Oh, okay.
That's always fun.
Yeah, Long Beach. So that is, and then where's Long Beach from where you're at?
It's south of us.
Just south.
That's maybe, just based on traffic, it's that's what it comes down to, an hour and a half to 2 hours.
How far is that from you? So Long Beach you're in Burbank, right?
Right. Yes.
And Burbank, if you were to drive without anybody on the road, how long would that take you?
Probably like half hour,
Yeah,
maybe
half hour.
45 tops. Yeah, just mileage, true mileage.
It's a little ways, yeah. So half an hour, 45. And then with traffic, you double that or triple it, right? Something like that going across LA.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I go with my buddy. He's got a, 18-foot center console, and he's like, "Hey, we're gonna push off at 7 p.m." I'm like, "Okay, I got to get off work, an hour or two early to go fish with him, if I'm leaving during the week."
Yeah, yeah, right.
So that's kind of it's all sometimes, if you were to travel in the middle of the night and there's no traffic, everything is the true mileage and, obviously equated to miles per hour. And usually that's what it is. But, LA with our traffic, it's
Yeah, yeah.
usually adding an hour to hour and a half. And even when you're thinking an hour and a half, there's an accident that
There's an
makes it two
accident.
hours now.
Yeah, there's that. Right, right, right. Okay. And so Long Beach, yeah. So you do have some other species. Well, let's hear on leopard. I wonder, that's interesting. So you, now with the leopard shark, is this also depending on water temperature? When's the time that you might see some sharks out there?
Usually maybe like February, March would be a time frame. Thinking back, like, let's say like September, October, seeing some. Once again, it just kind of comes in on their when they're spawning is what we're looking at. Water temp when they're cruising. Sometimes you'll just find pods that have slipped in and they're cruising when you're fishing for your Corbina. And so that's where like all of a sudden, one prized fish, at least to myself, goes to a different prized fish. And it's just switching gears again. So, you're taking off that 8 or 10 pound leader or 12 pound, whatever you're leading, and throwing anywhere from 20 to 25 pound leader on, anywhere from 3 feet to 6 feet per se. Like when they're in, sometimes it's only a week or two that you'll see them. And so with myself, like just really dialing it in, there's still the randoms that it's just when they're happening, they're there, and it's like either you're getting news from someone, hey, I saw a leopard, and I was out, for 2 days, and I've been seeing them, and I've been casting at them, I've been putting that time in, I've been putting 5 hours in, and I finally got one.
That's it. Wow. What's it like catching? What is the leopard shark? I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to see some of those out there, hook into some of those. What does that look like?
Oh, I mean, it's so that's where we go back to that 6 weight rod. You get a fair hook. That's key. Number one, when we're fair hooking leopards, that's when you'll be able to put some pressure on with a 6 weight. Is it ideal? I mean, for me, my experience has been yes, it works, and we've landed them. I think as people's experience grows, they'll see that the 6 weight works. But it's a kick in the pants. I mean, you're getting a good take. You're watching a fish. You're watching the shark. Track your fly. You're delivering it. Kind of out in front of them, and you're stripping it. You might be switching to a bait fish pattern. I like to use blue over white deceivers, sometimes red over white clousers, olive over white. But it's just when they're tracking it and they finally do take. And you get that solid strip set. I mean, it's just, I'm not going to say all hell breaks loose, but I mean, it's a fish that's running, I mean, it's got
Yeah,
some
it's a
power.
shark. I mean, it's a shark, right? This is an actual shark.
Yeah, it's designed for speed. I mean, it has torque, and they're, we always say they're going to Catalina. They're taking that run on you. But, when you got the right, leader on, which is, I like to use 25 pounds. So in case I hook them on one side of the mouth and we turn them the other way, and if that leader comes across their teeth, which they're not sharp, but they're, enough to beat up your leader or break your leader off, you might have a leader that has some abrasion on it, but you're able to turn them. You gotta let them run. It's not like we can horse them in. So you just let them run, and when you can put some pressure on them to turn them and parallel the shore, and you can start reeling on them. You start reeling on them. You walk with them. I call it a give and take. Sometimes I got to go into the water to gain line, and then I'll try to back out with them with the line I gained. They'll come in, and you think you got them, and then all of a sudden they got another spurt of energy and they're running. Past experiences, usually there's like kelp and stuff, free floating kelp that's kind of out and about, and for some reason they know to put your line in that. So you're kind of dealing with, just, oh, I got kelp on my line now, so now I have a different pressure. That pressure could relieve some slack in the fish. So you're trying to get it off, trying to lower your line into the water and shake it, but still keeping tension on it. If you have a friend with you, and you're able to gain on your fish after, multiple runs, and, kind of wearing them down. I'm not going to say tire them down, but you wear them down, and you're able to bring them in. Your friend might grab them by the tail. If we're trying to beach them, we're trying to get them onto the beach. So when you're kind of on your own, I mean, that's where you really put your gear to the test. From your drag to your rod. When I've landed them on my own, that fighting butt's kind of like in my thigh or just right above my thigh by my hip, and you're putting, bending that rod as best as you can without breaking it. And I mean, that's just the fun. I have friends that have those hero shots of themselves, or someone that took a picture of them landing the shark by themselves. And it's just so rewarding at that point. Such a big fish that you caught, that you tricked to eat a fly. There's no scent being used. There's no nothing. There's no bait on our stuff. It's just straight hooks and feathers, maybe a little tinsel or something. That's it.
Yep. Right. Wow. And so that's and you land them, and what's the landing like? So you kind of beach them, and then you can go up and just grab them, and they're just kind of sitting there like any other fish, getting ready to get released.
Yeah, I mean, they're big, they're muscle. So I mean, you're getting them. They kind of settle down a little bit to where you're able to get your hook out. I'll use some pliers, not some forceps. And at that point, trying to get a picture of them, you just feel you think you're going to be holding it like a trout or something, and all of a sudden their muscle just forms them into a C shape, and then just your reaction is like, oh, it's trying to bite me. Is like, oh, and then so you just take either video and pictures. So you're just trying to, just get the whole profile of the fish as you're holding it, and you're trying to get that release, and to me, it's one of the best fish that we have down here that I do like chasing when they're here. I wish they were here a lot more often, but likewise, they're not.
No, it's temperature, right? Temperature related, similar to Corbina, it sounds like. And that's the thing with climate change. Probably you guys are probably seeing some of that too, right? Changes in temperatures aren't always what they used to be, or is that a factor now?
Yeah, yeah, I've watched. Yeah, I mean, if we're just kind of to watching everything the way it's flowing, it seems like I said, people catching Corbina, they're on the blind. Some people have been sight fishing them though, based on their location. But the fact that we're having that in like late November, just early December, that water temp sticking around, is it a El Nino or type situation happening? That could be. But like the trend when I look at it, it seems like we're catching Corbina later and later, so that warmer water's sticking around.
Yeah, you are, right. And so we talked Corbina, leopards, and then what about the perch? Now, these other species, are these more just you're catching them throughout the year?
Yeah, and their sizes, so it's if we backtrack a little bit, just on network of people that are out there catching, all of a sudden one day or for a week or so there's good sized perch being caught, and then the next you might have an associate going out and then they're like, hey, I caught a bunch of little. When I say little, they're palm size, even smaller than that. They're like 3 inches, 4 inches, and we're just kind of like trying to put that together. Were they in there dropping babies? Were those ones in there the whole time? Why were these bigger ones in the mix? But it's it's kind of like has its time when they come in and they're in the spawn, and that could have been the last go around, or were they dropping babies, this last few months, and then into like February, March type frame, starting to see bigger ones. And then you kind of find some holes in the middle of the season that, you're able to pull out some, when I say decent, they're the tip of the nose and the tail is hanging outside of your palm, so that's a decent one. Some of the bigger ones that have been being caught, I mean, they're people putting the time in, and the time is only like an hour or two that they put in, but it's quality time in a quality location where there should be fish, and they're picking up those bigger fish. Whether it's their cast that's getting further out and those bigger fish are hanging out there more, or those just bigger fish that have come in and are doing something, and the person was in the right place, right time with that pot of fish.
What is the fishing? You talked about Corbina a little bit. Is it similar to how you're fishing for Corbina for sharks, or describe that how you would hook into a shark?
Yeah, same thing. So once we identify them, I mean, it could be that you're seeing their tail as they're kind of, going back to the open ocean, and you're gonna sit on that for a little. You just saw one, and usually, if you're with someone or you're by yourself, you're gonna sit on that and watch it and see if they come back in, and then you're gonna see if you can identify multiple, and then you're gonna see if how far they go left or right, up or down, north or south. And at that point, once you're kind of seeing if they're kind of just hanging out in that area, mulling around, either hanging out with each other and checking each other out, so there may be, maybe a pre-spawn or spawning type thing, or they're just hanging out together, eating, and it's just time for them to be around. I just make sure that they're going to kind of stay in that same location. Doesn't mean I haven't walked, 4 or 5 lifeguard towers up and, same thing back down to follow them and put casts out. But it's going to be, putting that fly out in front of them or tracking it diagonally across them, letting them see, the profile of either a bait fish. If they're not taking my bait fish pattern at that point, maybe I am throwing on like a clouser, something that's a little bit bigger profile. But that, yeah, just comes down to getting it, for them to, approach it, their mouths are underneath, on the underside of them. So it's, using a bigger hook is a bigger potential for you hooking them in the mouth. And then likewise, rod tips down and you're stripping, your cadence is getting adjusted, till you find that right cadence for them to eat and to be interested in your pattern. And, it's a strip set, a good solid strip set. And even after I've strip set in them and they're running and, you get it, people tell you get a second strip set in there, bury that hook in there. And yeah, it just comes down to fighting them. They go left, you go right with your rod. You keep that rod angle at 45 degrees. You make sure your drag's, and that's set at a decent amount. Sometimes if you're not feeling good and they're taking more, it's kind of that fine line. Do you play with your drag, or do
Right.
you just use
Right.
your palm? I
Yeah.
feel a little more confident having the drag and using my palm because I know it's only going to last a
A
small
second.
duration.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'll gain on them again. And if, I feel confident enough, maybe I'll put like a couple, 3 turns on it, knowing I didn't feel like I had enough pressure on them. But it's almost like you're adjusting your drag when you know you're going to be throwing at them, as opposed to like, your drag set with a Corbina or even a Perch. Perch, we're stripping in by hand. So it's, when you're with those beans, you have your, drag set, but not to a significant amount of pressure, but enough so you're not getting backlash, but enough to put pressure on them and wear them down a little bit. But yeah, just making those adjustments on your drag prior to casting at them is big.
Pescador on the Fly offers a full spectrum of fly fishing gear for any angler at any budget. By bringing high-performance rods directly to the angler, they eliminate the middleman markup, saving you time and money. The top-tiered El Rey series is designed for serious anglers, with the El Rey G6 being the most packable, high-performance rod on the market. And most anglers who try the G6 can't believe it is a 6-piece rod. It performs just like a 4-piece. There's no difference in performance. Whether you're fishing local streams or embarking on your next adventure across the world, the G6 delivers precision and power wherever you go. You can get 10% off your next order right now if you use the code WETFLYSWING at checkout. That's pescadoronthefly.com. Use the code WETFLYSWING for 10% off. Never fly without your G6. Discover the El Rey series and more at pescadoronthefly.com. We're going to jump into a few more tips from you here, but I want to do a quick little segment before we start to take it out of here. This is our Wet Fly Swing trivia segment. We've been having fun with this on the podcast here, and today I'm going to have a question about what we've been talking about, and this is going to be fun because the way this is going to work, people can we're going to post on Instagram, and what the question today is going to be, what do Corbina fish mainly on? And we've been talking about this today. There's a few different species, so the question is, what do Corbina, and people listening right now, basically to answer this is you can just go at Wet Fly Swing and at Trout Routes, which this is presented by today, Trout Routes, on Instagram, and then we will select a winner, and then that winner is going to get some goodies. We're going to get some swag together from Trout Routes and give a free yearly membership to Trout Routes. So that's what we're doing here. And so put your answer to that question in. What do Corbina mainly feed on? And then I'm going to circle around and see and choose a winner. It's not going to be necessarily the first person I get there when I'm on social. So that's the question. I'm sure we've been talking about this a little bit today, Frank, but what else have we missed as we, today, from our conversation?
Yeah, do you know what? Just like coming to the fisherman spot, I think is key. You guys, people out there want to learn more. I mean, we're here to educate. We're willing to share our knowledge. We're willing to grow your experience. We're willing. It's what we want the community to do is we want to grow it and cultivate it. With fly fishers that have that experience, etiquette. We're always pushing etiquette. And it's we're always saying hi to each other out there on the water, and likewise understanding like I need to give space. But I think like just establishing one of the last fly fishing shops in Southern California.
Is it?
I believe. Yeah, I mean we've
Wow.
had Bob Marriott's closed down. Orvis just their last day of business was the day before Christmas Eve.
Crazy.
Just kind of looking at who's kind of left right now in the Los Angeles area. I mean, it's fisherman spot. So to
No
keep that
kidding.
place going, I mean, I just really recommend, all our locals, stop in and buy local, and likewise, when you stop in and buy local, you're talking to local fly fishermen, so I mean, to be honest with you, we're fishing, between Dave and myself and some of the other folks in there, we're fishing all the way south from Magdalena Bay all the way up to British Columbia, Montana being a favorite of the locals of ours, our fly tire instructor, myself, so
You
I
cover
like
it
to
all.
say we fish everywhere. Yeah, the experience is, from salt to fresh water to warm water to brackish water to there's a puddle over there.
So the travel program, like you guys have people that are there that live in town and they're fishing. They do have these opportunities like we talked about today, but they also are traveling a lot around the country, around the North America, wherever.
Yeah, and that's where the shop comes in and be well rounded. We do realize, maybe our customer base is taking trips to Belize or to Patagonia or, to British Columbia or anywhere else, to go fish for tarpon. So the shop being versed in multiple lines and knowledge, that's what we bring. It's come in and get that, direct contact with us with our experience that we have and let us get you dialed in.
Exactly. That's sweet. Yeah. So that's a big part of it. And what is it like with the shop? So you mentioned the fisherman spot. When you walk in the door, it's always interesting. I haven't been there, but what do you see when you first walk in the door? Is it kind of fly tying materials? Do you have a mix of stuff? What is that first?
Yeah, right when you walk through the door, I mean, you're going to look at all our signage in the window as you're walking up, and then you're going to walk in. And I enjoy that we have a Hardy floor mat. Hardy's been a big
Oh,
tradition
okay.
here,
Hardy. Yeah.
with fly fishing. So, I mean, that's your floor mat. To me, I'm like, hey, we got to keep that clean and front and center, but overall, you walk in, we got like some luggage off to the right. We got a rod rack off to the right, and then you got your packs and stuff to the left. And you start walking down, there's a tire, and then all of a sudden there's flies to the right. And if you're looking at the big picture, straight in front of you is a wader wall, off to the, there's fly time material off to the left. We got collectibles, and you get to the counter, you're going to see the reels. You're going to see, specialty items that we have.
Is the counter in the back or the front from the door?
It's in the back.
In the
It's in
back.
the
Yeah.
back. So yeah, I mean, honestly, you're gonna hear a hello, and if I'm in the shop, we're gonna have some music playing. We're gonna, have this vibe going, and it's
Right.
just like, where are we going? What are you doing? Welcome in. What's going on?
Are you guys ever tying? Is there somebody tying flies? You have a little station there for that?
You know what? We do once in a while. Usually Sundays, we kind of like encourage people to come in and tie and hang out, so building that community. But we have vices set up that we're selling, and there's usually something. If one of us spins something, you'll see a collection of flies that we've done. It's just based on, we're kind of busy. Downtime, it's a little more challenging to tie. I mean, I do enjoy when I have tied there, and someone walks in and I'm tying up some flies and they're like, "Oh, what are you doing?" You get to show them some stuff. And even if they're not tying, they're like, it's a conversation that starts, and maybe they wanted to start doing it, and then, with the classes going on though, with fly tying classes, introduction to fly fishing, introduction to fly fishing, the surf, etc. There's, all kinds of people walk in to buy tip, and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, there's a fly tying class. I need to get in on that." And so, we're generating, people's education ways. So it's just to broaden everyone's experience and have somewhere that they can call their shop is what I look at. They want to be part of something. We want to be part of their life and vice versa. So, and it's something big.
That's really cool. And we talked about this at the start, but the intro to fly fishing, the surf, what does that look like? Is that a in class or like in class and on the water?
Yeah, a lot of the times we'll go out on the water. I mean, that's to me, it's you already got that experience fly fishing, so it's getting out on the water, looking at those tides. Precursor. Either they need gear or they're gonna use some gear. So it's going out on the water, meeting at dark 30, treating it the way we are going to be fishing. But it's also understanding if it's their first time out there, we gotta, obviously kind of go over some basic, safety rules and identify why we'll kind of wait till the sun to come up. We're going to be throwing a sinking line, so it's getting hands-on, getting your feet wet or not wet, based on what we're going to be fishing for, and just putting that time and developing your experience so that you have this carousel of different experiences, different views of what you're looking for, and you can pull each one every time you go to a different beach. Yeah, it's hands-on.
Yeah, it sounds pretty cool. It sounds like you guys have a little community down there with the shop. And who is the owner of the shop or the owners who are? It's been there a while, right? The shop's been there quite a while.
Yeah, it's been there. Geez, I want to say, time frame that it's been there. I think I want to say, yeesh, it's been there since like 1960, I believe.
Yeah, so a long time.
Yeah. I mean, but it was all gear fishing in the beginning. There was a small, 1970, I'll say, is when Steve came into ownership is what it was, and it was generally building rods, jig wall, small little section of fly fishing. And then, in 2000 or so, they decided to, turn the whole shop over to fly fishing.
I think this is great. I think you guys cover a lot. It's not only just the surf. I mean, you've got all this travel going around, and you've got a great shop. Again, it's one of the last ones that are remaining there, which is really kind of crazy to think with all the people down there. But tell me this, because I think we talked off air about your story. You've got an interesting story getting into fly fishing. Maybe let's hear that before we start to take it out of here. How did you bring it back? How did you get into this? You're guiding, you're doing all this stuff. Has this been a long story to get to where you are now?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I mean, I can keep it simple. There's the story of, your dad gives you this fly rod at 16, he's going to teach you to fly fish. And, it's, just busy, I mean, either it was, to be honest with you, at school comes into play, football, so I grew up fishing with him, fly fishing rod handed to me. One day we're going to do this. I'm going to teach you to, career takes off, as a career wildland firefighter, 15 years. So fishing was kind of like opening day and closing day, and maybe in between, in the summer. So like 3 times a year type thing. And I was just gear fishing. And one season I went up to go be a smoke jumper, and I came across my rookie bros, and they were building rods and tying flies, and I was like, this is the stuff my dad was talking about. And so I would tag along with them, and this is like in 2002. And so when I got home after that season, after watching them and just observing how they were casting and what they were doing, I was like, I got to do this. I got to focus on this and do it. So I stopped carrying my spin rod and took the fly rod out. And, like I said, like 3 times a year, for anywhere from 3 to 5 days, I would be out fishing. But it took me a good year of teaching myself. I think if you've taught yourself, we all kind of go through all the ringer of everything. And it took like a full year to finally catch, a little 12-inch trout. And it was the most rewarding thing. And so I just kind of continued that path. And so I'm not going to say unfortunately, but fortunately, if I look at it in the positive way, I was in this car accident. It was a traumatic car accident, traumatic brain injury. I got medically retired. Things that come with my brain injury was, as I was in recovery, and rehabilitation wise, I just became real recluse. My parents ended up medically retiring. I was married at the time, and to help take care of me, get me back on my feet, literally. But in that whole time frame, my dad being a disabled vet, he was like, when I retire, I'm going to go do this Project Healing Waters. And part of my story is that with me being recluse, my dad's like, he's looking at his son, which is me, and he's like, man, I got to get this. I got to bring something to this kid. And so he tells me like, hey, I need your help. I'm going to Project Healing Waters. I can't hear too well. Maybe you can help me. And I was like, yeah, cool. And long story short, it's there for him. But likewise, the community he took me to was fly fishing. And the disabled vets were welcoming. For some reason, they mistook me as one of them, and, very welcoming. But even after that, once they found out it was obviously more from my dad, they were just, really helpful. There was the exposure to Orvis. I met people at Orvis at that point. And then, as we're kind of going through, we were asked to join a club. Sierra Pacific Fly Fish is a local San Fernando fly fishing club. And so with meeting them, they're like, hey, have you guys been to Fisherman's Spot? It's our local fly shop. So my education of fly fishing is just all of a sudden now growing, at exponentially moments and time frames. And it was big. And so then I meet these guys at Fisherman's Spot. So I meet Dave, I meet Steve, I meet the old owner, Ken. And, I was almost in there every other day. Me and my dad would kind of just go in there and hang out. And a part of my thing is like we belong to a traumatic brain injury survivor group, and we had a person come in and talk about the Department of Rehab. And so I made contact with Department of Rehab, and it was a pipe dream. I'm like, can you guys help me figure out how to get my guide license and pursue this career and in the outdoors and educating people? And they're like, yeah, what do we got to do? And so at that point, I mean, I was out there putting time in. That's what I was recommended from my buddy Dean. Was like, go put time in when you get a chance, kind of follow me around on my guide trips, on my classes, you sit in and kind of see how he runs things. Another gentleman, Lee Behrman, another mentor to me. He ties flies here locally. We sell them in the shop. I was able to fish with him and, just kind of learn, fly fishing the surf for him. So, all the people that kind of put that time in before me, learning from them, reading books, just really, really focusing, to become proficient and to be able to, explain to people and teach people, what it is that we're doing and how to become successful, or how to increase your chances to become successful, right? So to me, it's like time on the water makes you better. from casting to fishing to understanding it. So it was just putting that time in. And likewise, I don't know if we caught, Department of Rehab had helped me, kind of through that whole program. And, that's what really got the ball rolling. The big kicker was, Project Healing Waters, getting the job at the shop was a big part of it. And, throughout the seasons, being able to guide and instruct and do things was key, and now being in the shop, just being able to help people get started is one of the biggest things. That's the most rewarding part.
Yeah. Wow. And so now you're there basically all the time. You're guiding throughout the year. Is that if somebody wanted to get a trip, how would they do that? Just through the fly shop?
Yeah, they could contact me through the fly shop. Basically, is kind of usually how it works, and then we just set up some times that work for them, and we go out and do that. It's and likewise, we're just bringing customers in is the big picture, and building that relationship. Once we get them started, we're building that relationship that they're going to keep coming back for the knowledge, for the gear, for everything, and that's kind of where I think it is. We're looking at building our customer base as our friends too. And then supporting our local fly shop, that's what's going to keep, that knowledge being pressed out. And likewise, if we educate people, they're educating people. So it's just this big ripple effect that happens.
Yep. No, this is great. And well, take us back just to wrap this up on what we talked about. We talked about Corbina and some of the other species. What are 2 or 3 tips that you're telling somebody, they're getting ready to head out there for their first time on the surf? What are a few things you're telling them to get ready, maybe have more success?
Obviously just think stealthy.
Yeah, stealth.
Yeah, being as stealthy as you can. Presentation, we're not looking at, chucking and ducking and slapping the water to get their attention. We're trying to usually lay in a delicate cast, being able to see the fish you're casting at, if we're per se going to go look, if they're going to go look for Corbina. Overall, that's about it,
That's it.
just light tippet.
Yep. What is your tippet? You said 25 pound. What would that be for Corbina?
25-pound will be for the leopard sharks. As far as, you can go anywhere from 12 to 10-pound tippet, 3 to 6 feet, sometimes 8 feet long, 9 feet long, just based on how spooky that a Corbina might be. But usually right around 10-pound is what I usually run. People, if it's their first time, I'll tell them like, hey, you can run 12 and then you can decide from there if you want to go down to 10, if you want to go down to 8 and, give it a little bit of, play it a little bit more, use your rod to be your shock absorber, don't horse them in at 8-pound unless you're comfortable. If you're comfortable enough and know how to play a fish on 8-pound and, deal with the surf and the surge and the tide and all that, then go for it. But I think like overall, like just find the fish first, observe their behavior, and see what they're eating. That's pretty obvious. If they're feeding on the crabs, you're going to see them coming into that sand and trying to loosen up the crabs to eat.
Yeah. What if they're feeding on fish, like are they also feeding on little, what other fish are swimming out there?
I've caught them on a flashy black over white. When the grunion run happens, the shore gets packed with multiple species of fish. So, I've been out there and like, okay, I'm gonna go catch a halibut because the grunion are running and the halibut are gonna come in. So I need to chuck a bait fish. Lo and behold, I've caught, Corbina on bait fish patterns.
So it does happen.
So, are they opportunistic and eating, smaller little fish? Maybe. I've caught them on that, whether it was they're getting their attention, but it was, the intent to catch something else and catching some Corbina in the mix.
Cool. And what about a resource? If somebody wanted to take this conversation further on the surf, is there a book, video, some person that you'd recommend?
You call the shop, Fisherman Spot, you'll be able to talk to me. You can reach out to me at Frank's Fly Shack on Instagram. Always, from there we're DMing and getting conversations going. Then likewise, it goes to like, here's my phone number, contact me or come into the shop. We can get, that's a classroom there too that we utilize, so it's, you want to talk, shop with me. Like that's what I do encourage, I'm not the sale end all type thing, but I'm a part of, getting you educated. There's people like Glenn Ueda, there's Al Q, there's Lee Behrman, Dean Endress, these are all people that have put that time in, that have that experience and are willing to share. So there's a good handful of people that are educators that want to see you successful, and you can reach out to them. There's books, Fly Fishing the Surf by Lee Behrman. There's Al Q's Corbina Diaries, and that breaks down a lot, and I have all those books. I refer back to them. It's those books that you hold on to that make your experience, broadens your experience. And it's just something you can refer back to, but For me, myself personally, I do enjoy talking and meeting somebody, and even from my own experience, to go gain knowledge and experience, it's talking on the phone and like, hey, can I come meet you? Where do you work at? Or, where's somewhere that we can have a face to face, just building that relationship, it just goes so much further. But I mean, Fisherman's Spot, I definitely recommend, just give us a call. If I'm not there, ask when I'm going to be there, ask to leave a message for me and I'll reach back out. I mean, the biggest thing I see is like, I just want to put it out there, the young folks coming in and the women, that community is growing, and, there's a lot of fishy women out there. And I hear them say, they want somewhere comfortable, and that's what we're all trying to create for everybody. We have a saltwater fly rodders club on it meets out of the Fisherman's Spot. I'm the president there. And, the last meeting that, we had a couple more women come in, and, we're all diverse, so, I mean, part of my thing was like, hey, there's no color lines, there's no gender lines, there's only fly fishing lines that we worry about here. We want all to feel welcome and inclusive, and we want to educate everybody. We want people to stand in their power and knowledge and grow it and cultivate it. And, just because I fish salt doesn't mean I don't fish freshwater. I mean, I was raised fishing for trout. It's just now as I'm here in Southern California, this is what, that's kind of like our specialty, working in Montana. That was my specialty, fishing for trout. It's just becoming diverse in every fishery that I'm around, and anything that I can travel to and have that experience grown and fishing with other people too, and gaining that's where we're at. And then it comes back to the shop, and then it comes back to the clubs, and then it comes back to, education of people. So it's becoming proficient in that, and being able to put people in the right direction with gear, with locations, with what and how to do it. That's kind of where I look at. So,
And the clubs are great too. What was the name of the club that you're involved with? Are there a couple down there?
I'm involved with Saltwater Fly Rodders Pacific One. Our meetings are the second Tuesday of every month from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on that Tuesday. So I'm the president there. So we have like we have a, kind of dinner, with people bringing pizza and appetizers and desserts. In the first half hour, we're kind of just hanging out, talking, eating. 6:30 to 7's kind of like our little small club meeting that we have, just bringing everyone up to date, dues, etc., the plan for the future. And then we usually have someone come in and give a presentation anywhere from fly tying to fly fishing to surf to, calico fly patterns, Long Beach breakwall patterns. It's a club that had been around for so long, and then it got dissolved in the COVID time frame.
Oh, it did. Yep.
Yeah, so we just brought it back in the last
Cool.
4 to 5 months.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah, so it's we have a good, the age group. I mean, it's right in line with anywhere. I mean, our youngest right now is probably like 25, and then the average is going to be probably 40.
Yep.
And on average 35 to 40. And then, I just call them our home guards, the older club members that were like, oh, we're bummed to see the clubs no longer functioning, but they're still doing trips or hanging out together. When we brought it back, that whole group kind of came back, so it's, the big focus I would say is we have a good, middle-aged group with young folks involved and encouraging that. And then we just have those home guards that kind of just they passed on that experience. So I have friends that aren't even guides that, educated me and mentored me and showed me the way, and it's just like, those are role models to them in what we do here. It's passing on that knowledge, skills, and abilities in a way that people understand it and can utilize it.
Yep. Wow, that's great. Yeah, so that's the salt. And was there another one, the Sierra, or is the saltwater the main club down there?
That's the club I'm associated with now in shop. It's where we do it. But Sierra Pacific Fly Fishers is one that's, also started out a Fisherman's Spot,
Okay.
in the 70s. So, I mean, and that's still around.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot. I mean, the major ones that I think of would be obviously Pasadena Casting Club, Long Beach Casting Club.
Yeah, Long Beach. Right.
Yeah, in the immediate area, there's Sespe, there's Santa Barbara. So there's a variety. We got, ones that are in the current area too, and
Yeah.
that's
More clubs than fly shops, it sounds like, down there.
right. But I mean, that goes to show how many fly fishers there are that are associated with clubs. And then there's also ones that aren't. So, I mean, it kind of is like a half and half, it serves its purpose
Right.
for what you're looking for, and if you just want to come in and just meet people on the beach, on the water, you have that opportunity. If you want to be associated with the club, you want to gain knowledge, I think our Saltwater Fly Rodders Club like opens that door to like, hey, we do more than just fish for trout. It's in things we specialize in. Project Healing Water is another good thing, the local chapter.
Yeah, that's right. Project, and we're doing some stuff with them this year too. This is, no, I think you mentioned a lot of great groups. I think today, maybe we'll leave it there and we'll circle back around with you later on, next year and see how things are going. I think we covered it pretty well. We'll send everybody out. We mentioned it, fishermanspot.com. If they have questions for you, and also on Instagram. Remind us again, what's your best Instagram, your handle there?
Frank's Fly Shack for me.
Yeah, there you go.
Frank's myself.
Yeah.
And then Fisherman Spot has an Instagram too as well.
Okay, Fisherman Spot. Cool. We'll follow both of those. And yeah, this is awesome, Frank. I appreciate all your time today. This has been great to hear the stories and all the tips, and we'll stay in touch with you. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate that a lot.
All right. If you get a chance before you head out of here, head over and check in with Frank, fishermanspot.com. Give him a call and let him know you heard this podcast. If you're in town or swinging through there, definitely stop by. It sounds like it's one of the last remaining fly shops down there. I know they would love to hear from you, and you can get a little insight on taking this to the next step. Wet Fly Swing Pro, as always, if you're interested in booking trips, getting access to our community and connecting with listeners of this podcast, go to wetflyswing.com/pro. We'll let you know when we open up the doors to the next cohort. Also, want to give you a heads up. We've got a bunch of stuff going on next month as we speak. We've got a big event to, if you haven't heard of the Teton Valley Lodge, we're going to be opening that up next month and talking more about that as we go. Hope you enjoy this one, and hope you have a chance to explore that big trip next, and hope you're having a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. And appreciate you for stopping in and listening all the way to the end.